Tony Malmberg. I've had the privilege to get to know Tony and his wife, Andrea. They are associated with the AV Hub, which are helping to sponsor this event. We're grateful for them. We're grateful for his participation. He's been a podcast speaker before. Um, he just has such a way of understanding complex things and being able to make it simple, like not get bogged down. He has a lifetime of experience in agriculture, and we're just really honored to have you here with us today, Tony. And I think you're still muted, but we'll all read your lips.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for hanging in there.
Yeah.
Those in my time zone are probably getting a little sleepy at lunchtime now, but we'll get through it. So as I said earlier, I'm a third generation rancher. I grew up in the Nebraska Sandhills. I ranched in the Wyoming sagebrush steppe for 31 years. And that's when I went to my first holistic management class in 1987. And we spent 7 days sequestered in a Holiday Inn meeting room. And I walked away from that with only three things, three principles that I took away from that. One was the understanding of what overgrazing is. Two was the understanding a gross profit analysis. And three was the idea that you could have such a thing as a quality of life. And and just over the years, I've added more understanding of the holistic management decision-making framework. But the important thing is that I went home with just those three things and turned a ranch around. And that's what I would like to just remind everyone, just begin where you are. I've known so many potentially good practitioners and managers that say that they want to wait until they're going to get it right. And one of them has been waiting for 35, 40 years. But you just need to get after it, begin where you are. And in understanding where we are, I do a screen share. And I go to the slideshow. Does that look good, Jared?
Yes, we can see it. That looks great, Tony.
Whoops, I'm at the end of the deal here.
There, we get to watch it in rewind.
Yeah.
That's good. Then it'll reinforce as we go back through it.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm not able to go any further than that. So maybe I need to.
Yeah, just escape out of that probably, and then go. You might be able to go back to the beginning and then hit share again. We love technology, you guys. Everybody can say a prayer in their heart. Echo Selena's prayer at the beginning that technology will work and we'll get through this. This is going to be good. So while Tony's figuring that out, Tony has been on the ranch, and he's taught a holistic grazing course on the ranch here a couple years ago. And it was a privilege to get to know him. And his wife, Andrea, actually was the first one who did our monitoring for our land to market regenerative certification with the Savory Institute. And so it's been neat to rub shoulders with these guys. These are individuals that I'm grateful to have within my circle, and grateful to be able to raise me up to their level.
Okay.
Okay, looks like we're good.
Got her now. Okay. So this is a picture of my granddaughter in our ranch in Oregon. And the first thing I did when Jared asked me to do this was go to the dictionary and look up the word legacy. And it said a gift handed down from the past, typically a burden, considered as a sunk cost, irretrievable. Now that's a little different than what I thought of as a legacy. And I don't know if it's the real estate industry that has used it for marketing and going after people's pride or what, but so let's just go with that. Do we want legacy to be a ball and chain around the next generation? Or do we want them to be able to use it positively? I need to change something in my view. Okay. Many of the things that I'm going to talk about have been talked about already. So I would say that that's probably a good sign. We're hitting on these same principles. Change. Everybody, I think, has talked about change. And it is a reality of life. The only thing that never changes is change itself. So our goal is to try to figure out a fluid transition so that we are not having change happen to us, but we're creating change. And then healthy relationships. We have to have trust. Trust with the people we work with, the animals we work with, the soil we work with, the bank accounts we work with, and being accountable. That's the core of holistic management, is being accountable. How must I behave? No shame, no blame, just how must I behave? So to get past this negativity of a legacy and thinking how to shape our change, I like to think of it as getting past traditional practices and think about traditional values. One of the things that's worked for me is thinking about destiny. And that begins with our ancestors. We had absolutely zero influence on decisions or actions that our ancestors took. And the actions that they took set our lives in motion. Think of it as Newton's law of motion. A body in motion tends to stay in motion in the same direction and same speed until acted on by an outside force. Too often, that outside force is a trauma. Like we're dragged through the knothole of change rather than choosing revolutionary change. We get a reset. And there's two ends of this spectrum of our ancestors. When we arrive, we often think we're entitled to something, or we have shame for where we came from. And so those of us supporting young and supporting the next generation need to think about how we can reinforce those so that they're curious, so that they're not stuck in insecurity. And in a book I wrote, Green Grass in the Spring, here's a passage when that person helped me, a guy by the name of Bill Bates. While gathering cattle on the Red Desert, a high altitude sagebrush steppe in south central Wyoming, I rode with Bill Bates. Bill was built solid like a fire plug. His continuous smile and quick laughter made him easy to like. I'd ridden with cowboys from Nebraska to the Dakotas and from Colorado to Wyoming. If I made a list of the top 5, Bill would be on it. He could handle a horse, see a cow, and pick it up a notch when things got tough. I learned a lot from the stories he told me about his days with the matador. I respected Bill. One day, I was telling him about my problems. I don't know, Bill, I said. My grandfather made money ranching. He was good, but I just can't seem to cut it. If your grandfather were alive today, he would be doing things differently. The old timers that made it ranching did what they needed to do for the time they lived. They were smart enough that I bet they would be doing things differently today. Times have changed. He looked me right in the eye. Things are different today. So we need to acknowledge that we are who we are and set in motion by our ancestors, but not blame them or feel entitled. The next thing to consider is society. Be conscious of economic and societal waves. One of the big ones for me was the Endangered Species Act, the law of the land. It trumped everything, trumps the Clean Water Act, and I learned that early on. And many of my peers would sit in the coffee shop and complain about the environmentalists or other people that are ruining their lives by the endangered species. But I made a choice that this was a reality, and how can I deal with it? In our Wyoming ranch, that was sage grouse. We did a 10-year study with the University of Wyoming and had 3 master's degree studies on our ranch for sage grouse. In Wyoming, we work with salmon habitat, and diversity and complexity is better for everything and better for cows too. So just think about what it is. I think maybe the next generation, it might be climate change. Don't blame or complain. Just figure it out, and how do you use that to your benefit. And then chance. You know, if you're driving down the road and a rock comes plowing down off a hill and hits your car and smashes it, it wasn't because you were dumb and did something stupid. Or if it misses your car, it wasn't because you were smart in planning. It was just chance. So we can't take good luck or bad luck personally. You just need to acknowledge what happened and move on. And then there's personal choice. I have a square around that because that's really the only thing that we have a real decision making on. And if we're going to achieve our destiny, we need to get a vision through all the distractions and confusion around our core being. Now, my term for that is soul. You can call it whatever you want. And if we do a good job, if we sit down and meditate or think about it, we will get a more clear view and longer view of our destiny. And that focus will bring glimpses of our soul more steady and clear, and we become centered. So how do we organize the leadership and management? The leadership is doing the right thing, and management is doing things right. And we've heard a lot of people today talk about both aspects. And it's just understanding the place that you're in. Leadership is often value-based, and management is often practice-based. And we continue to have new knowledge in management, but leadership are kind of solid and more eternal. And that can help us get to practicing holistic management. So we have the holistic management decision-making framework here that looks kind of overwhelming, but it's actually pretty simple. And all it is a prompt asking questions for us to answer based on our core being and our core values and our holistic context. Again, we're talking about transition, trust, and how we must behave. So conventional decision-making starts down here under actions and decision-making. This is where most people start: objectives, goals, tactics, strategies, and these types of things. Holistic management takes a step back before we get to this. And we start out, let me see, how do I find the pointer? Annotate. Got it.
And we can see your cursor.
Okay, you can?
Yeah, now we can. Yep.
So we start out with what we have to work with, and we define how we want our future to be, and we ask, how must we behave to get from here to there? And then we do a diagnosis of how our ecosystem is functioning, because of all of our hopes and dreams and all of humanity's hopes and dreams are sitting on that foundation of our ecosystem. So we need to know where that is functional or not. And then we have these tools that catch up here, all of humanity's hopes and dreams. We have these tools, these 6 tools here: technology, rest, fire, living organisms, animal impact, and grazing, are like tools sitting on your workbench. They're the only tools we know of that can influence the function of the ecosystem process. They, just like a hammer or a wrench sitting on your toolbox, they can do nothing until someone picks them up. So we need this human creativity or money and labor to pick them up and apply. Once we select the tool, then we go through these context checks. You know, that a couple of people talked about already today: cause and effect. What is the root cause of the problem? The weak link, social, biological, and financial. Marginal reaction. Is it the biggest bang for a buck, etc.? And we've talked about those. But the purpose of the context checks is to avoid unintended consequences. If the proposed action passes the context checks, we plan. We go down here to the policies, procedures, and processes. And if our tool involves infrastructure, we do holistic land planning. If it involves money, we need to fund it. If it involves grazing, we need to get it into the planned grazing. And if it involves research, so we better understand what we're doing, we design some research. And then there's policy, both ranch level and public policy level. And this is circular. These are all kind of informing one another. If you have land planning that needs infrastructure, well, then you need to fund that. So we're making this circle all the time. And then we have the feedback loop. Getting from here to there. Assume you're wrong. And Roger explained that very well. That's the reason we do that, is so that we identify the early warning indicators to give us the warning that we're wrong, and we can adjust and control. Controls awareness of the complexities of self-organization. Holistic management is managing complexity. And we know we can't manage complexity because complexity is self-organizing. The best we can do is to influence the self-organization processes. And in rare cases, we replan. Okay. Everyone knows that we're experiencing an existential crisis with our climate change. And we have to get past the drama and feel the earth under our feet. It's not the atmospheric rivers. It's not the huge fires. It's not the hurricanes. It's this. It's just bare ground and lack of biodiversity right in our own backyard, on our own ranch. Atmospheric rivers are because the water cycle is dysfunctional. The biggest greenhouse gas is water. Why is that? Because soil organic matter, 1% of soil organic matter holds from 16 to 28,000 gallons per acre. We have demonstrated that in 3 to 5 years of proper grazing, we can increase our soil organic matter by 2 to 3%. That's a lot of water coming out of the atmosphere and back into the soil mantle, where it can produce grass, recharge aquifers, springs, and feed rivers. Think of the water cycle as when the raindrop hits the earth, there are only 3 things it can do: evaporate, run off, or soak in. And we want it to soak in and recharge the soil organic matter. The mineral cycle is we want to build soil. It has to rot. Without rotting, you lose soil. If you have plants oxidizing and burning, it's taking carbon into the atmosphere. Energy flow is capturing sunlight. If you see sunlight on the ground, that is sunlight wasted. Energy flow is the only place we have a free, totally unlimited source of energy. All we have to do is capture it. And then community dynamics, capturing that sunlight energy for more time, getting plants to grow for a longer period, have a higher density of plants, and have more leaf area of plants. And all these are affected by the ecosystem. So if you're beginning decisions conventionally, starting here with objectives, goals, and tactics, the tendency is to swoop right over human creativity and go to the tool of technology. And you're usually treating symptoms if you do that. Holistic management brings human creativity into the factor And we need to rely on the human creativity that is closest to the soil surface. If you look at these ecosystem processes, we can't see an ecosystem, but we see symptoms. We see symptoms of how they're functioning. And where do we find those symptoms? At or near the soil surface. So the greatest point of leverage is applying tools at or near the soil surface. The greatest point of leverage is the decision maker that is there at or near the soil surface. And we need to empower that human creativity and implementation of these tools that are closest to the soil surface. So in my quest, in providing a meaningful legacy to the next generation, we need to generate curiosity. Curiosity mobilizes human creativity. And the entitled, you just can't really deal with. That's what I tried to demonstrate in the book I wrote. I was the firstborn male of a white ranching family in the Western United States in 1956. That's pretty entitled. And those who are entitled won't change, won't do anything different until they break themselves against the rocks of our ecosystem. And so we can't do much there. But once they're broken, like I was, then they become insecure. And that's when people like Bill Bates and others can support and generate curiosity and try to help the insecure mobilize and address these things. Curiosity mobilizes human creativity. So this picture is after 5 years of grazing. If we go back, here's the picture initially before we started holistic plan grazing. And notice right up here, the bare ground. Notice the health of this shrub or lack of health of this shrub. Now, in just 5 years, you see probably annuals, but there's grass that has moved in there and covered that bare ground. You see there's perennial plants along this creek here, and moving up, these are annuals probably moving up here, and the health of the shrub. Look at that one more time. Look right down along the creek bank. So what humans are ranchers, and agriculture and land managers are a keystone species. And we will define our legacy. That keystone species can create this and has created this for thousands of years, or we can create this. These two pictures were taken on a bridge. Upstream is on the bottom of our ranch in Wyoming at the lower end of 8 miles of this creek. And then the photographer turned around on the other side of the bridge in the same moment and took this picture. Which do you want for your legacy? it's the people living and working on the land are a keystone species. Based on their knowledge and skill and curiosity, they will create this or they will create this. And it's important to note, I think Jim Garish pointed this out, is that there's one thing that's different. My grandfather didn't have access to the knowledge that we do now, the 4 missing keys of holistic management, that the grasslands evolved with migrating ungulates, and they stayed in large herds to protect themselves from pack hunting predators. And as a result, they would trash an area, then they would move on, and there would be a long time before they returned. Disturbance, recovery. Disturbance, recovery. And everything kind of flows from that. So if we can recreate that, and actually, we can never really expect the land to perform to its potential until we do acknowledge how it evolved. If we can mimic how it evolved, we can expect better returns. This is an example of a creek on that Twin Creek Ranch. You can see all these dead willows here in 1992. The picture on the right is about 10 years later. Same spot. You can see the hill. The dead trees are now laying down here. Let's see the new vibrancy coming up here. Still have some bare ground in here. Which legacy do we want? Which outcome do we want? These 2 pictures are the same spot. I had one earlier of this bank was just raw all the way up to here. But it catches sediment. And the bottom picture shows how a creek heals, how a river heals. The first thing you have, right where the dog is here, you have algae come in. And that algae collects sediment. And if you don't have animals coming in there and watering every day all summer long, but only for a short period, it captures that sediment. And then you have rushes and annual water plants come in to hold that. And if that doesn't get disturbed too much, too long of a time by grazing animals, then you'll get perennials coming in. And then finally you have a bank, building a bank. So the river is narrower and deeper and stabilizing. And the more we slow the flow, the more production we have. The more we raise that water table so that it's reconnected to the floodplain, the more production we have. With that narrower channel, a high flow will come out and go out on the bank and fertilize the bank and spread the water. So this is in Oregon. And we had a heat dome here a few years ago, in 2021, June 29th, 2021, there was this heat dome. And the ambient temperature was 116 degrees Fahrenheit. And on our place that we had actually discontinued irrigating because of over irrigation practices, at the soil surface, the temperature was 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Just a mile from here, another place that we had just purchased that had been over irrigated and was compacted and bare ground, the temperature at the soil surface was 145 degrees. Define your legacy. Which outcome do we want? This is on that ranch that we purchased. It was over irrigated. On the right-hand side here, you can see what it looked like. Over irrigation causes compaction, and the root zone was only about 3 inches, and then just hit compaction. After only 3 years of only irrigating once per year in that same spot, on the left-hand side, you can see how the roots are breaking through that. A simple guideline for irrigating is when the soil moisture content is 50% at 8 inches, you want to irrigate. If you irrigate before that, you create compaction. You kill these plants. So in building an enduring legacy, just think about there's 2/3 of the Earth's planet where the brittle environments, the grasslands of the world are. There are already livestock there. There are already people there. They're already managing, whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether it's traditional or cutting edge. It is happening. But if we want an enduring legacy, we need ecological literacy. The people closest to the soil surface need to have the ability to diagnose the ecosystem function. They need to be able to make a decision on managing what matters. They need to be able to select the tools to influence our ecosystem in a positive way. They need to be conscious of the holistic context and how that is going to improve their quality of life and how they're behaving to create the future resource base necessary to support that desired quality of life. And yes, the people closest to the soil surface are a keystone species. So what legacy do we want? So my wife and I are both co-founders of Savory Institute. And when we sat down to start this, Alan Savory pointed out that he had trained 10,000 people in holistic management, and he estimated that 3% were practicing holistic management. And so we asked, what was the positive deviation? How are those 3% different from the 97% that didn't practice? And we came down to 2 things. Number one was that those that practiced it had some support, some local support. Excuse me. Every ecoregion has certain species that are critical to the survival of the other species in the system. Keystone species could be a huge predator or an unassuming plant, but without them, the ecosystem may not survive. So Savory Institute designed this hub network so that we had a network in place that would train people in the context of their geography and their culture and their local situation. And that's UVI is the Western United States as a hub of the Savory Institute so that we can train, provide training, provide implementation support for these people at the soil surface. And that's where it matters. You know, the ecosystem processes, we see how they're functioning at or near the soil surface. And the decisions at or near the soil surface is where we affect the change. Our mission: we guide land and livestock stewards to repair and regenerate through holistic decision-making informed by sound ecological, financial, and well-being planning, implementation, and monitoring. So I have often said that I don't give advice, because if you give advice, two things happen. Number one, somebody might take your advice and it will be out of context of their situation. It will be telling them to do something that worked for me in my situation, and I don't know their context. I don't know the reality they're dealing with. So what I do is provide perspective. And as a result of that, UVI has the principle that we do not consult. We guide. We do not teach. We guide. And we develop these local communities of people that learn from one another. We might be there to field some questions or prompt some questions, but they mostly teach one another. Down here in the bottom in the center, you see a picture of Jared Sorensen on our class we did down there. So we're guides in the practice of holistic management. We're guides in holistic ecological outcome verification. One of the most, the best means of monitoring that we know of today. Now, this is today. There might be something better in the future, but for now, and here's another picture of Jared on his place setting up an ecological monitoring transect. You can't manage what you don't measure. And we have, for a long time, been managing money and measuring money. There's benchmarks and ratios that we use to manage money. It's more recent that we manage ecological conditions, and the most advanced and dynamic means of monitoring today is the ecological outcome verification. And we have, in holistic management, we talk about land, people, and money, but we never had a means to monitor well-being and the social aspects And Andrea has developed that, and we use that at UVI, called Life Energy. And go online and check it out. It's an important part of our regular check-in process for monitoring the whole. Guiding implementation. And this is the key to upping that 3%, getting more holistic management on the ground, is creating these local communities that support one another and supporting them in getting started and learning the practice of holistic management. Each of these pictures are a different locale. Down here in the lower left, we're in a financial planning course with a family reassessing their ranch management in a generational transition. So back to this book. Another thing that Jim Garish pointed out, I wanted to read a section here that kind of reiterates one of the things he pointed out. So I'm having a conversation with my extension service agent. He continued, but your alfalfa is pretty sparse. So that would not be the case if you were to plant a new stand of alfalfa. But that is the case with the grass stand you have today. We chatted about the nuances of the study, traded some local gossip, and touched on national politics. Then Ron asked me something that would shape me for the rest of my life. Most ranchers have 10 years of experience that they repeat 5 or 6 times. Can you get past that 10 years and learn something new? And I think that's a key to leaving a positive legacy, is lifelong learning and ingraining curiosity and getting past traditional practices and thinking about traditional values. And this passage kind of explains why it's so hard. I spent a good deal of time walking. I would leave the ranch house with a book and climb to a ridge somewhere above the problems of the day. I could see more from the ridge tops. I let my thoughts soar with the eagles and possibility. When the sun slipped toward the Wind River Mountains, I would slide down a canyon and drift home as my thoughts slid into the arroyos of my mind. Just as cattle drift and overgraze the canyon floors, just as water wears a crevice in the easiest route to the ocean, my behavior would gravitate toward old habits and traditions. It takes effort to keep raindrops and cattle up on the ridges, but it's even tougher to keep our thoughts there. And then, as you develop in that, gaining more confidence, getting past that insecurity, and working through and having curiosity, that confidence allows for vulnerability. And here's a passage that describes that for me. Tenderness should not be confused with passivity. Tenderness provides the space for kindness and acceptance of self. In that space, we gain courage. With courage, we can better stand up for who we are and who we want to become. When rebuked, we turn the other cheek. Too often, toughness provokes us to spray pesticide, rope a wayward calf, whip a horse, or scold a child, when taking a deep breath might be more productive. In that pause, we might see how we are contributing to the problem. With courage, we take that insight and become part of the solution. Monitoring means listening. It means observing and asking questions before taking action. It's Pee-wee. Well, Pee-wee was my hired man of 25 years. It's Pee-wee standing in a field for an hour, collecting data before making a decision. It's me recognizing that the appearance of cheatgrass can be a good thing for the diversity to come. It's getting the information and hearing the message. With tenderness, we can even see when the best course of action might be simply getting out of our own way. With courage, we own our behavior. We have confidence and we gain momentum. In that space, we are fierce. And finally, this theme has also been recurring today. And it's a recurring theme through this book, trying to learn this principle. It's after we moved to Oregon. Our home place near Union, Oregon had different issues. We purchased this property in part because the irrigation water came from one of the most critical Chinook salmon streams in the Pacific Northwest. Based on our experience with sage grouse in Wyoming, being involved with an endangered species was on the 19-point checklist. We believe the practices that support endangered species add diversity and complexity to an entire environment. We know more functional ecosystem processes benefit livestock productivity and our profits. We set out to learn how this worked with salmon. Holistic management has taught me that when a problem presents itself, we should ask, what can we add to the equation? What can we add to the equation, not look for things to remove? And the end of the book before we moved to Oregon tells us a key critical factor, I think, of building a legacy. My mother had her life earnings buried in this ranch. She deserved more than a Social Security check to enjoy her twilight years. I couldn't risk her peace and comfort. Katie was still in college and had accumulated debt. We wanted to take some of that financial burden from her. She needed space for hope. I was getting older. I'd seen a bankruptcy. I knew how quickly things could unravel. I didn't have the youth to ride through another washout. I should probably provide a little background. This is after 7 years of the worst drought in recorded history in Wyoming. The cards on the table looked rather ominous. Sure, it was possible that our last hole card would draw to an inside straight, but not without risk. Despite history, emotion, peer pressure, we realized it was time to leave. After all, holistic management is value-based, not place-based. And with that, I can take some questions or give people time to have a potty break.
That is great. Tony, what an amazing presentation. We are honored that you're able to join us here. If anybody does have questions, please type them in the chat. Yeah, sorry for those that have been kicked off. Not sure it's technology. Appreciate your perseverance here.
What?
Um,
Oh, Andrew reminded me I forgot to have our contact info there.
okay. Yep, Margot just put it in the chat. So maybe tell us about um what your free offer is. And the code is regen24. So she just put it in the chat. You just go to the link that's underneath Tony's picture, and it'll take you to the AV website. And then when you go to checkout, enter the code capital Regen 2024, and it'll drop that price from 100 down to 0. So what is it that they're getting there, Tony?
And there's a QR code there.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Right
So
hand corner
either way, I'll get you the same place.
there. Yeah, it's an app. You can get an app to walk you through developing your own holistic context and regeneration plan.
Like it. Okay. Very good. So check that out. Lee, did you have a question? Maybe we just unmuted. So Tony, with the journey that you talked about in your book of going through financial distress, of having to move, of having to step away from the place that was generational for you, what was it that gave you the strength to be able to do that? Was it what you mentioned, which I like that quote, that our holistic context is not place-based, but
Value-based. Yeah.
value-based. Okay, I got to write that down.
Yeah. Oh, you have the book, and it's the last line in the book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that last chapter went through that process, which was not fun, was not easy. But it just like tradition, we're comfortable in tradition and we don't want to change. Change is hard. But the more you practice change, you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that allows you to do something. It's the same as tradition. Become comfortable with being uncomfortable as you move away from that. But I think the important thing about this book is that if you're entitled, you're just not going to get there. You have to be broken, and then you'll become insecure. And then it's up to the community to support those insecure so that they become curious. And you mobilize that curiosity. Then you mobilize the most powerful force in the universe, human creativity.
Yeah. That is beautiful. Lori said, always looking for a good book. Lori, if you will private message me your address, I will send you a copy of Tony's book if you don't already have it. It is a great read. We like to give away books because we like to spread education, and that's one of those books that I would love to share with you. Matt asked Tony, to go along with Jared's question earlier, what traits are common among successful holisticators? I like that. You better.
It's owning your actions. It's asking, how must I behave? In the 1980s, I had a ranch management firm that was founded to manage ranches for absentee owners, but it ended up being in the middle of a farm crisis. So we ended up working for attorneys and bankers more than that, which wasn't that fun. But my grandfather told me when I was very young that every man owed it to himself to work for 3 or 4 different outfits. Because if you didn't learn something to do, you would darn sure learn something not to do. And that work that we did, I saw a lot of things not to do. And it boiled down to three core things. Number one was too much iron. People owned depreciable assets that only worked for like 6 weeks out of the year. Number two was too much debt. And if anybody remembers, we were paying over 20% interest in that time frame. And number three was poor estate planning or no estate planning. The attorneys got the place rather than the next generation.
Yeah. Yep, that's tough. But that's great, a great book. We appreciate that. That's part of our core curriculum here with the students that come through the ranch during the summer through William DeMille's program. And then also I encourage those that we coach to get Tony's book. It's just such a great opportunity to be able to learn vicariously, to be that wise person, to be able to learn from the experiences. And it kind of helped. That book is great because it helps you feel the range of emotions. I mean, I could sympathize with where Tony was at, and probably shed some tears that he shed also. So yes, send Tony lots of love and appreciation in the chat if you would, please.
So that's great that you say that, because one thing I've learned is that people do not change based on facts. People only change based on feelings. And that was what I tried to do, is to be honest enough so that people could feel it. And it's not advice, it's perspective. It may apply to your situation or not. So don't take it as copying something out of rote. It's just a perspective. But you need to, when you do those context checks, the last one is the gut feel, but you need to go back through every one of the context checks and feel it. Feel what that's going to mean to your family, what that's going to mean to your grandchildren, what that's going to mean to the plants and ground under your feet, what that's going to mean to your animals under your charge, and feel it, because people don't change based on facts.
Yeah. There's a lot of good nuggets that you've shared. I've got a lot of good one-sentence, one-liners. I'm going to put one in there too in the chat. Please, if you guys share your epiphanies, your takeaways, your action steps that you've gotten from this talk from Tony, remember that lesson to teach what we've learned and get to learn it twice that way. So an honor to have you with us here, Tony. We appreciate you, appreciate the AV Hub, the Savory Institute. Again, they are the sponsors for the summit, and appreciate how you've shared that with your list and been able to expand the reach here of the summit. So have a blessed day. We hope you can continue to join us and add value and input.